have hired a new manager. His name is, of course, Derek Shelton, and he's kind enough to join us from the start of the program today. Welcome in. Thank you for coming to see us. We appreciate that. You had quite the entourage.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I do not want that to be. If I'm going to be considered an entourage, please, it's not Dustin and Mitch like that. I mean,
that's a good point.
Can I be cooler than that?
That's a very
from the jump.
Well, I'd say welcome to town, but it's not like you're not familiar with the town, right? I mean, you've obviously been here before, but now you're in a very, very different role, and we're going to try to cover a lot of ground today, I hope, in the time we have. I should mention to folks that Glenn Mason is going to join us in studio at 4 o'clock as well, the former Golden Gophers coach. The interesting thing about Mace, I don't know if you know Glenn Mason at all.
I do not.
Well, before I did radio, I was a very snarky sports columnist for the Star Tribune. And then for a while I did both. But for much of the time that Mace was here, he and I had what might be best classified as a hate-hate relationship. It got a little ugly. He didn't appreciate some of my sarcasm. I don't know that I would necessarily blame him. So there were some highs and there were some lows. But it just goes to show you that you never know how it's going to turn out, because now he has been, Gargi, how many years has Mace been on with us?
15, probably.
Maybe 15 years. He has been faithfully joining this show once a week during the college football season. In fact, it was up to him. He would join us year round, but I think, again, we probably punch each other again. And we've come to he every once in a while, like today, he'll bring up, do you remember that time you wrote this and such about me running up the score or whatever? He doesn't forget everything, but he obviously got to enough of a better place that we've been able to coexist for 15 years. So you never know how this thing works. You never know how relationships can change.
I love that.
Yeah, it's a good thing. I want to get early to, I've got a lot of teachers in my family. Guardsy's got teachers in his family. And I believe you are the son of a teacher and a principal, combo platter of both. What does that do for you? What's it like being how has that helped form and shape Derek Shelton?
Well, I think that's a good question. My father was a teacher. My mother was a teacher. My father was the dean of students when I was in high school. Wow. So he was in charge of discipline. So if I missed a period or class, he knew about it and would show up at the next class wondering where I was at. I think the foundation of education to begin with is really important. Both my parents being teachers, my father being a high school coach. He's in the Illinois High School Baseball Coaches Hall of Fame. It teaches you the ability to learn and to listen. And I think one of the greatest strengths I saw with my dad is he went from, and I appreciate you brought up he was a principal, he went from being a teacher to being an administrator. And for anybody that's in that space knows that, okay, all of a sudden now you're being evaluated by that group and you have to sit in and watch teachers teach and then give them their evaluations. And some of that was with my dad's closest friends. And I kind of learned this after I got out of college in the conversations with him. But the ability to maintain those friendships, along with having very open and honest communication and evaluation, I think was really important. And the one thing I learned about my dad, and my dad will be at a ton of Twins games this year, and I tell people he's the nicest person alive. He's the exact opposite of me. The one thing I really learned from him was the ability to listen. And that is something that I got from as he made the transition out of being a teacher and into an administrative role, the ability to listen to the people around him and the information he was giving. And it was definitely a strength of his. It's definitely something that I tried to aspire to do and try to continue to do. It's something I learned. You know, my personality at times is you want to talk first. And when you get into leadership roles, you know, it's not necessarily the case. So I think that's what I learned.
Didn't he coach you for a while too, though?
He did. Yeah, it was tumultuous. And I will say that, like, if you're coached by your father and then you go home at night and you have to have dinner, thank God for my mother. I think
the buffer.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think she kept me alive numerous nights. And then thank God for some of his assistant coaches, because I think at times when my competitive spirit, let's put it that way, would go into play, there were assistant coaches that may have stepped in between interactions between my dad and I, but it's where my love for the game came from. I mean, I grew up in a small town in Illinois, and we didn't have babysitters. We had either athletes that came and watched us if my parents ever went out.
Sure.
Or the fact of we went to practice. We went to football practice. We went to baseball practice. We went to basketball practice. So we were in the gym. We were on the field doing those things. And it was such a great learning experience. And that's one of the things I appreciate. I live in Florida now, and it's one sport year round. Like my son played baseball in the fall, and he played, my daughter plays volleyball. It's year round. I love the fact of the Midwest or being in Minnesota where people still play multiple sports.
Yes, they do.
You know, they go from football to basketball.
Yeah.
You know, they play, and I miss that. And I think that builds a lot of character in people.
Was your dad, when he was coaching you, do you think he was tougher on you because, you know, he felt like he had to be, or was he easier on you? What was
he
that
was
like?
tougher.
He was
I got
tougher.
thrown out of everything that ever. My dad, this is the God's honest truth. And if you meet my dad, I want you to ask him this story. So you'll meet my dad this summer at some point. My dad also taught a life-saving course to be a lifeguard.
Wow.
Okay. At a local gravel pit. That's where we worked in the summertime. And it was the greatest job because...
Is this Carbondale?
No, this is in Gurnee, Illinois.
Oh, Gurnee? You went up. It was first Carbondale, then you moved up. Right.
So then gravel pit, and it was the greatest job because all the athletes worked for my dad. And he was flexible around baseball, around basketball, the schedule. And when we had a life-saving class, we were in the water one day, and he threw me out of the life-saving class because he did not like my attitude.
Oh, my.
So, yeah, he was definitely harder. He was trying to set an example on me or my brother of like, listen, if they live in my house, I'm not going to take it. No one else is going to take it. And the thing is now, all my friends, I mean, I'm 55 years old. All my friends now see my dad, and they're like, what happened? He's so soft. He's so nice. And I'm like, grandkids happen.
He changes everything, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That's very true. You know, I mentioned yesterday we're going to have you on, and I got some texts yesterday. We get in here via the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line. By the way, if you have questions or comments, 646-86 as we chat with Derek. And you've heard this already, I'm sure, but a lot of what I got was, I'll just ask you, there are people out there who are saying, why in the hell would Derek Shelton or anybody else want this job, knowing what we know about ownership right now, payroll right now? There's a lot of frustration. I'm not telling you anything you don't know in this marketplace among very devoted Twins fans. So I'll just ask you, why would you take this job?
I think that's a great question, and I appreciate you asking it, and I actually appreciate, you know, that your viewers or your followers are asking that question. I think there's a couple things. As I was here for 2 years, and of every place I've been in my career, I can't explain it. You've lived here. It feels like home. You know, I was embraced in that role. I was hired by Paul Molitor. And I think, as I talked about yesterday in my press conference, probably one of the most intimidating times of my life is sitting across the desk, which is now my office at Target Field, and being interviewed by Paul Molitor and him questioning me about things in the game. And I'm thinking, good God, like, this guy's one of the greatest players of all time, and I'm explaining to him what I think. So the fact that I was embraced there, and then being here the last year I was here, I mean, we had an unbelievable season under when Rocco came in. It's one of those places that has always felt like home. It's always felt comfortable to me. When the opportunity came up, the respect I have for the front office here, it was something I wanted to be part of. And it's something I wanted to be part of moving forward to get back to where we want to be, to make Twins fans proud of what we're doing and how we're doing it. Do I understand their frustration? 100%. And appreciate that, because if they're not frustrated, it means they're not passionate. It means they don't care. So I would rather have to be that way. And I realize that there's going to be trust that has to be earned.
Sure.
I'm all for that. But I think those are the factors coming into it. It's going to be a young team. We're going to have to develop. I understand that. I think the previous experience of going to Pittsburgh and learning that will be helpful moving forward in terms of the young players we have here.
There's a part of me that wonders whether you're a glutton for punishment, because you've gone, you know,
I did do radio for a while. So
that's true.
There you go.
The Pirates weren't exactly known for massive payrolls. In fact, I think the biggest one you had while you managed was 86, 82 million, something in that range.
Sounds about right.
That's it. And now here they have been bigger than that, but still have been going down somewhat. So, I mean, I understand these jobs are hard to get, you know,
right.
They don't grow on trees, but man, you have had to work. I think in the minds of most people, those are impediments. Those are, you know, challenges that make whether you're the greatest manager in history or not, make the job much more difficult because there ain't much margin for error if the payroll's around 82 or 83 or $85 billion a year.
Yeah, I understand that, and I think that's true. And I will go back to the learning experience I had in Pittsburgh with some of those, as people, I think, as you said, like challenges of where it's going to be. I think you do have to look at your young group and how you're developing and where it's going. I think any manager that takes any job is a glutton for punishment because honestly, there's going to be criticism. We criticized, if you look at the World Series, Dave Roberts is getting criticized on his lineups and what he's doing and where Mookie Betts is hitting. John Schneider is getting criticized. These are the two best teams in baseball at the highest level that went to 7 games and maybe the greatest World Series of my lifetime. And both managers are getting criticized. So I think when you sit in one of these 30 chairs, you realize that. So I don't know if that's a glutton for punishment or not, but I do think that I realize the criticism will come with that. And that's fine. I understand.
Sure.
I understand that's definitely part of it.
Well, the history here that the team has gone backwards on payroll. They had they finally broke through and won a playoff series, a game, and then a series. And then immediately the payroll, got reduced by $30 million. And then even then that next season, the team got off to a good start, didn't get any help at the trade deadline. And then that was the team that kind of, collapsed a little bit. So there's just so much baggage that you have nothing to do with. And what's weird is, to me, the job is a double-edged sword a little bit in that the perception, whether it's fair or not, the perception is that the challenges have less to do with who's managing the team and more to do with who's owning the team and the direction that the team is going to go in that regard. And so, on one hand, I say, if you guys have a really good, surprisingly good season, you're going to be viewed as a genius because you're going to be viewed as he overcame all these challenges from within the organization. On the other hand, I think there's people I've already heard from who said, it doesn't matter if he's Sparky Anderson in his prime or Tom Kelly in his prime, that the challenges you face, just even the vision, because to this moment, maybe you can answer this question, because we have not had answered the big question. Okay, what are we attempting to do next year? Is the payroll going to stay the same? Is it going to go further down? Is Joe Ryan going to be part of this rotation, or is he going to be traded away or not? All of that, I think, enters into why a lot of people say you can hire whoever you want, but until some other questions are answered, it's probably not going to be fair to evaluate any manager.
Yeah, I understand that. And I don't think, you and I are not going to be able to answer that question today. I do think when I sat down and you spend 30 years in the game, when you sit down to interview for a job, you're going to ask specific questions. And I did ask specific questions to our group about where we're going. Now, for me to tell you that today, I'm not going to because those are private conversations. But I think the understanding and the clarity I got made me really want this job even more. And I think as we go through this offseason, we'll have clearer answer to those and what we're going to do. No one can sit here. And this is the thing that I think is very interesting to me and the most challenging in terms of when you get into off seasons. No one knows what the market's going to hold. Because I would bet there's times when you're doing your show and you're like, oh my God, this guy got this much money. Or, oh my God, this guy got this much money. And I can tell you from being in the big leagues for 20 years, you sit in meetings in October and they say, hey, this person's going to get 2 years at $15 million, and all of a sudden it's a 4-year contract at $60, and you're like, wait, where did the market go? Right. So I think I understand the frustration there. I really do. And I understand people think, well, why don't you just answer the question with clarity and say the payroll's going up, the payroll's going down, the payroll's doing whatever. I don't think right now we can answer that with clarity. We have to see where the market provides and what we're going to do. The one thing that I do feel strongly about, and you kind of touched on it, is to win, you have to have starting pitching. And right now we have starting pitching depth. That is very important in the game today. I think we've seen that with teams that have gotten better. Now, we've also seen teams in markets, Milwaukee, Cleveland, that have had success. So how we go about doing the things is going to be just as important as how much money we spend.
Let's get our first pause in. We're chatting in studio with new Twins manager Derek Shelton. Lots of good texts are coming in. Lots more ground to cover. I mentioned Glenn Mason's going to join in the 4 o'clock hour, and then Kessler, is he 5:15 or 5:30, Garzi?
I'm bringing him right in at 5. We're going 5 to 6, top 5 at 5.
There's plenty to talk about, obviously, with the election elections yesterday. So we'll continue with the new Twins manager after a very brief pause. Oh, first we got to do a bonus bucks thing.
The fan and 2-man and a junk truck want to give you a shot to win bonus bucks. It is our national cash contest, and the keyword for the 3 o'clock hour, it's Wednesday, is dollar. Go to KFAN.com and enter the keyword dollar.
Studio with the Twins manager, Derek Shelton, kind enough to join us. Lots of questions coming in via the Bradshaw and Bryant KFAN text line 64686. You have talked a lot, I think, in the presser yesterday and maybe elsewhere about, not surprisingly, you get fired early this season, going through the bitter stage early, the angry stage early. I want you to describe a little bit about how that manifested itself and how you got out of that stage and what was the next stage you went to.
Yeah. Well, the manifestation of that was, right, wrong, or indifferent, or however people have opinions about it. You work your whole career to get to that. I had been a minor league coach, minor league manager, coordinator, hitting coach, quality control coach, bench coach, like the whole thing. And then you get there and you get it taken away from you. And it's a definite blow to your ego. And, I think I said yesterday I was pissed. I went home and you're bitter because of the fact you get something taken away from you that you do every day. And then the second component to that is you see it, how it affects everybody else in your life. My wife watches games every night. My kids, I have adult kids, they watch games. My parents, my friends, people that are invested in you that, at that time, we're not Pirates fans. They lived in Florida. They lived in Illinois. I have relatives that were Cubs and Cardinals fans that in the division became Pirates fans and, bought stuff. So you see it, how it affects them. So you take it personally because it's affected everybody else in your circle. And then after you do that, and I would not say how long that took, a couple weeks, maybe, you start to reflect on okay, why did that happen? What did I do wrong? Because the other thing that happens is baseball's been my life since I was a child, and professionally for the last 30 years, I didn't watch games. I didn't want to watch games. And then people would text me hey, the Pirates lost tonight. I'm like, I don't, no one texts me when the Pirates won. But,
right.
I have a friend that is a big Mets fan, and I remember the Mets swept the Pirates, and he texts me every night,
loved it.
Yeah. And I'm like, I don't want to know this, but do I want to know this, because I'm still invested in the players.
Sure.
The person that took over the job I hired, it's my staff, all those things. And then I got to the point that was really important is I got to the reflective of all right, what did I screw up? What did I do wrong? What did I learn? Did I change as a person? And I started to reflect, and I don't know what your process is, Dan, but I started to take a lot of notes. On my phone, whether it was voice notes or just typing. And some of it was sitting by the pool. Some of it was sitting by the pool with a cocktail midday, which you don't normally do.
Right.
But I started taking pages of notes, and then I started talking to people around me. What do you think I did right? What do you think I did wrong? I talked to people I worked with, previously worked with. And
were they honest?
Yeah, they were. I think, I shouldn't say yes, but I think you get enough of the same signal that you're okay, they're being honest. I talked to former bosses of mine, people I'd worked to before. And I think the biggest question you ask is did I change? And what made me change? And I realized there were some things. Now, was it the pressure of the job? Yeah, maybe. Because I think as we talked about in the first segment, are you a glutton for punishment by being one of the 30 guys? Yeah, you are. You definitely are. In any professional sports team or major college coach, you're a glutton for punishment because of the fact that somebody or everybody at one point can critique something or criticize what you did. But I think at that point, when I started to reflect on what I could have done differently and how I changed as a person or how I changed in my interactions, then it was you know what? If you want to do this again, you need to look at yourself in the mirror And then you go to the person that's the most honest with you as your wife, and you start to run down the things. And she's like, yeah, I think that's real. I think this is the way it came into play. My oldest son is 25 and was in Pittsburgh. So you're able to have conversations with him. And then the other thing for him is he's around a bunch of people and, he hears things. So like you take all that in. And I think going back to, the best question you've asked me so far, all due respect, is like, why this job? And I think you put all those things into play of how you feel, how I feel I can impact this group of people moving forward. And you have to be honest with yourself. And if you're not, then there's no sense in taking this job. And there's no sense in doing this again. Go be a bench coach, go be a hitting coach, go do those other things where you're not under the pressure. And, I think it's something that Mike Brown, the guy that coached for a long time, he's like, you have to honor the pressure of the job. Someone's giving you the responsibility of the pressure of the job. And I think that was really important to me and completely transparent. And I don't know if I said this, but like if I would have got fired in September, I would not have been ready 100% because I wouldn't have gone through those phases of what I went through to be able to try to do it.
So let's drill down a little bit more though. So is it, you came to the conclusion that you were too impatient in some cases, too soft in other cases? When you say, I learned some things that I think I can use this time around where I might have made mistakes, what were the mistakes?
I agree. I think I became too impatient at times.
Okay.
I talked in the first part about my dad and being a good listener, and I, credit myself or think I do a good job of that. I think I got away from that. I think that was probably the biggest learning experience. And it was really interesting that you asked me that question at the top of the show about that, because that was something I reflected on. I thought I did a good job early on, and then I think my impatience kind of showed up. And because of it, and I said this yesterday in the presser, it was like we would have conversations, but I wouldn't have the follow-up conversation.
Right.
And then you leave players or you leave staff members in a gray area of like, what did this guy mean? Like, where is he at? And I think my impatience there is what came into play. And it was an unbelievable learning experience. And you have to be able to be open with yourself. You have to, kind of be raw with yourself. And again, if I would not have had that time, I don't think I would have done it. But I think impatience is number one of like trying to go a little bit too fast with things. And then, as I pointed out yesterday, in this Twins team moving forward, like attention to detail, I think I let myself get away from it. I grew up in the Yankee system where the attention to detail was like, that was like rule number one. And I think as I look back and reflected, like we got away from that as a team a little bit, and that's on me. That's my fault. That's something I got to get better at, but it's also something moving forward that I will make sure we pay attention to.
When you talk about the conversations that you have, are you talking about when you're speaking, addressing the entire team, or you're addressing individual players and your staff?
I think it's both. I think it's both in terms of making sure the clarity of message in terms of if you're doing it with the full group, how the follow-up is or how it landed.
Right.
But I think it's more one-on-one or, two-on-one when you're having conversations with people, especially players, of like, this is the point I was trying to make. Gotcha. And then, how it landed. And I think in today's players, they want to know the why, probably more so. I mean, this is as much as, I would have loved to manage in the 70s and 80s. You're talking about Sparky Anderson.
Right.
When Sparky said something, they did it. Now, Sparky also managed 9 Hall of Famers, so, sign me up for that at any point. But I mean, I've talked to Tony Perez because I coached Eduardo, and I talked to Tony, and one of the things he told me is like, if Sparky told us something, we were doing it. So in today's game, it's transitioned a little bit. Players want to know the why, and they're getting information from other places. So I didn't do a good enough job there, and I think I learned that through the process.
Give me an example of where you think you and Rocco are very similar in terms of managerial style, and give me a spot where you think you guys are utterly and completely different.
Similar, I think we both like information. We will both take information in and process it. I think that goes from, we both spent time in the Rays organization, and I do not think in any way, and I would say Rocco's the same way. I don't think information is the end all be all. You have to watch the game. You have to use your eyes. And I think that's something that's really important. I think that's something you learn. I don't know if I necessarily thought that as much when I first took a managerial job. 6 years ago. But I think after managing games, you have to use your eyes. You have to watch the game and see what happens and how it transpires. In terms of how we're different, our personalities are completely different. It's one of the reasons, and I mean, you've spent time with Rocco. It's one of the reasons when we worked together, I think we were so good.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because our personalities are on the opposite end of the spectrum. And the one thing that I admire about Rocco Baldelli is, and you know him and have had him in studio, is he has tremendous humility. And I think anybody that's spent any time around him can learn him. But in terms of, who we are as people, we are the complete opposites. And we are complete opposites when it comes to music. I can tell you that. Like,
so you're not a Fish guy.
God, I had to listen to so much Fish. We would listen to Fish in the office, and I'm like, are there any words to this song, or is this a 17-minute instrumental with no damn words? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, that's too good.
So, yeah, I think that's like our personalities are polar opposites in terms of where we sit there.
Baseball is such a slow cook. Obviously, I don't have to tell you this. You've lived it your whole life. It's a 162 game season. I grew up. I learned as a writer some of my baseball from Tom Kelly because I got here in '86, and obviously then they took off in '87 and again in '91, and I rolled my eyes like everybody else about even keel, and you can't get too high, you can't get too low because it's kind of boring. But for baseball, it's kind of true because it goes on forever. The season goes on forever. So in a sense, though, if you have a little bit more, I don't want to say volatile personality, but you might have a little more going in that regard than, say, Rocco. Does your personality match the game? Is it tough to be you in a game that teaches you day after day that you cannot lose your mind every 15 minutes?
Well, you can't lose your mind every 15 minutes. I have lost my mind a few times, probably more than a few times. I do think the even keel portion of that is because, you very well stated that the season is so long and we are so reactionary, especially in today's society. You lose one game and it's Armageddon, and then the next day you win and it's like, oh my God, we're the greatest team of all time. And some of that has to do with the ebbs and flows, what happens in that game that night. But I do think externally at times you have to remain calm. But internally, you're going, and I will say, there was a couple times even when I was here, Rock got ejected, and I was like, you didn't even raise your voice there, dude. Like, where are we going? Where are we going with that? So I would say, when I get on the field, will probably be a tad more animated than it has been previously.
Well, I also think, regardless of the sport, that there is a place for an edge for I mean, that's to me, that's the interesting balancing act. Where it is, you got to be even keel. You can't lose your mind constantly. But you can also lull yourself into a false sense of security if you never respond to what's going on. Say, whoa, we ain't going any further. We got to deal with A, B, and C, or we're going to be sitting here a month from now going, well, nothing's changing. So you strike me as a guy who's not afraid in that regard to have an edge to make that point. Because to me, regardless of the sport, that has to be part of the message that a manager or a coach conveys. Yeah,
your players have to feel that edge, and I think that's something also I reflected on. This year, and I think that's where my impatience came in. Is where's your edge at? How is your edge coming across? Yeah, and you 100% have to have that. The thing about baseball today is you could lose your mind every night if you wanted to, and I think you have to be calculated's probably the bad word, but just aware of the situation and where you're at and how it's going to affect your team and how they're going to react to it. So I think those factors come into play every night. But if you wanted to, I mean, you could lose your mind every night.
You mentioned you had what you classify as very frank conversations with the people who ultimately made this decision. And again, I don't expect you to give away the secrets of the farm. I understand that part of it, but Can we assume that on the basis of the fact that you said yes when they came to you eventually, that you heard enough answers that satisfied you that you're going to have a chance to do something here?
Yes, 100%. And I think the one thing that I really appreciated from Joe Paulette on down, it was the fact that when I went in and, I came into this situation, and this was like any different interview process that I've ever been part of. And actually, I thought it was going to hurt me. fully transparent. I don't think I've said that. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but I'm saying it. Like, I thought it was going to hurt me. Like, they're familiar with who Shelton is. They know who we are. And there was the pleasantries of like an interview, and manager interviews are challenging. They're long, they're tedious, and you meet with a ton of different groups, and they're back to back. They fire stuff at you. And I really kind of thought it was going to hurt me being familiar with me. Like, okay, they know who I am. Well, there was no pleasantries. There was not, if it's a 60-minute block or a 75-minute, there was not the 10 minutes of, hey, how are you? Get to know you. It was like, let's go.
Yeah.
Boom. Let's go. What have you learned? We knew you before. What are you doing now? You didn't have certain success. Why not? Like, those questions were asked. And I appreciated that part of it, because I really at one point thought, oh, they're familiar with me. That's going to hurt me on the front end of this. And it actually led to a way more in-depth managerial interview. And I've been interviewed in other places. I mean, I got the one job. I've been other places that I had interviewed for jobs and ultimately not got them. But it was the most intense interviews that I had been through. And then the other thing, and again, going back to the conversation with Joe, the first thing I said to Joe was like, what's on the table that I can ask you? And his response to me, you can ask me anything. And I was like, all right, if we're going to have the open dialogue about that, then this is a place that I want to be.
We used to have Jack Morris on this show pretty regularly during baseball season. And he had come to the conclusion, and for a while he was also doing some Twins TV games, not a bunch, but doing some of those games as well. And he strongly believed that this regime that still runs the team pushed most of the buttons, that this organization believed in the approach that I think a lot of organizations have taken, which is, all right, yeah, a manager matters, but we're going to put a lot of things in front of him, and we're going to push a lot of the buttons more than the days of Sparky Anderson does whatever the hell he wants to do. Tom Kelly does whatever the hell he wants to do. And he said, because I remember asking him a couple times about how do you evaluate Rocco? He said, well, I'm not sure, because my sense of it is that they come to him and say, here's what we're going to do and so forth. And you're just sort of like executing whatever their plan is. So what do you say to that? Do you abide by that, abide by that philosophy that indeed that's the position you're in? Do you feel like you're going to have the independence you need? Or are you okay signing up if indeed that is the new reality for a lot of organizations as in terms of how they handle their managers?
Yeah, well, so I think there's multi-layers to that. Number one, there's way more information in the game today. Right, wrong, or indifferent. Like, right, wrong, or indifferent. There's more information in the world. Rather, I mean, 10 years ago, the Lions weren't going for it on 4th down when it's 4th and 8. So there's a lot more information in the world today, regardless of sport, regardless of society. It's what's happened. I can tell you that there was never a time when I managed in Pittsburgh, there was never a time in the 2 years I was here with 2 different managers that anything was ever dictated to the managers. There was nothing ever dictated to Molly that I saw. There was nothing ever dictated to Rocco. When I was in Pittsburgh, there was never anything dictated. Are there suggestions? 100%. But just like your boss here, I assume at some point makes suggestions to you. Sometimes you take them, sometimes you nod and say, thank you for the suggestion, and I'm going to do this. That is 100% what I expect. There will be no one making the decisions but me. Will I take information? 100%. Will I process it? Yes. Will I take information from one of my coaches that may have no analytical thoughts at all, because I'm going to have a different group of guys that'll come to me and say, like, hey, have you thought about this? No, I have not thought about that. A couple of times I had writers in Pittsburgh tell me things and I was like, damn, that's actually a pretty good idea. So that part of it is kind of blown up in the game. I mean, I watched Joe Madden manage for 5 years and everybody said, okay, Andrew Friedman's telling him this. I watched him run a game and not talk to anybody. And he's a genius at what's going on during the game and a master in watching his eyes. So I think that is overblown a little bit in the game today of where it's at. I understand where it comes from, and I respect that. But in no way have I ever been told, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And then the other thing is, once the game starts, there's so many different factors that go into play that, I mean, this isn't, 1987 or 78 when George Steinbrenner's calling Billy Martin in the dugout and saying, take this guy out. That doesn't happen. So I think the factor of the game still played by human beings and the fact that there's so much that goes on during the game that changes off. It would be great if we could chart out, this is going to happen during the game. Right. And then someone wants to tell you how to react to it. That'd make my job, that would not be a glutton for punishment. That'd be a lot more fun. But in no way is that happening.
The Derek Shelton baseball philosophy. So you're clearly a person who gets that there's more information and you're not afraid of it. You're not intimidated by it. There's a balancing act. I think most managers agree where you can't let it overwhelm you. You have to use it as a tool. And I'm sure that's a difficult balancing act, and different managers probably come to different conclusions on it. But, the contrary position is sort of, you can have all these stats, but I know this guy, I know this player of mine, and I know this situation, and my gut tells me this is the guy I'm going to keep up to come to the plate in this situation, regardless of these numbers that tell me, no, you should not be using him. So how do you go about, what's the Shelton philosophy on that?
I love that question, because I'm gonna throw this back at you a little bit, because I started to do some radio stuff.
Yeah.
And the thing in the game today is it's because you have the numbers. So it's easy to second guess if I do let someone hit.
Yes.
I do let someone hit because my gut says, hey, this guy's going to get it done tonight. All right. The first question after the game is going to be why did you do that? Because do you see these numbers?
Yes.
So it's funny how people like to talk about, okay, you make decisions, but then the first question is why you didn't make it.
Especially if it goes wrong.
Especially if it goes wrong.
Yeah.
Now, if it goes right, it's
yes.
Oh man, he played his gut and it's great. If it doesn't go right, it's does this guy even understand the numbers? So I think there's the yin and the yang now, because honestly, the media is so well educated on what the numbers are, and you guys have access to them too. And I learned that. And like I said, I did this. I did it the hard way, and then for 4 months doing XM, I'm why are they doing this? What it's easy. So I think one of the best pieces of advice I got was from Don Zimmer when I worked for the Rays.
Yeah.
And what he told me, and Zim hated numbers.
Yes, he did.
He hated numbers.
What a character.
The best. But the one thing he said, regardless of what you do, make sure you're okay with it. Because you're the one that's going to stand up at the end of the day, and you're the one that's going to have to answer the question. So when I make a decision this year during the season, and it's with my gut, and it doesn't go well, and the first question that I'm asked is well, hey, the numbers said this, I'm probably not going to say, oh, yeah, that was my gut feeling. I'm going to say, yeah, you're right. It didn't work out that way. I had trust in the player, something to that regard. So that's where you're taking in information all the time, but you also have to watch the game. And then that's where the communication with your player group is. You have to know your players or trust your staff to say hey, this is going to work out. And then sometimes, quite honestly, you'll look at your pitching coach or hitting coach or bench coach. That's why bench coach is the best job in the game. You can give as much advice as you want, and no one ever questions it. But you look at him and hey, what do you got here? And they're hey, you should let this guy hit. And you're you're right. You're convicted because of that. And then it doesn't work out. I'm answering the question that night. So I think there's the yin and the yang there, because the first thing that you could do on your show is what was he doing?
What was he thinking?
Why didn't he do that? And if I called you and said I went with my gut, you'd be
oh,
that's great. But why didn't you do that? Does that make sense?
100%. Very true. One more segment. Let's get one more break in. I've got one more segment with the new Twins manager, Derek Shelton, kind enough to join us in studio. Back with some texts next. Derek Shelton is in studio with us, the new Minnesota Twins manager. I'd had a couple texts, Derek, from people wondering whether your style in terms of dealing with the umpires was to go guardy on the bit and get thrown out every other game, or a little more low-key like Tom Kelly, who rarely got thrown out of the game. Where are you in that mix?
I'm probably in between. Gardy's in a category.
He is.
Very much respectfully by himself.
Yes.
Very, very. I mean, Gardy, Bobby Cox.
Yeah.
Maybe Aaron Boone is the modern day.
That's true.
Of that. So I am a little bit in between of both those guys.
That's it. And so tell me about, did you have one, though, that got a little viral?
Yeah, I got one. I had one in, this was before I knew what John Boy was. And Jackson, my oldest, was like, Dad, you made it. You're on John Boy. But it was in Tampa, and I live in the, St. Pete, Tampa area. And it was the first game of a series, and my wife we had about 45 people there. And I got ejected in the third inning. So we were on the hook for a lot of tickets. Not that people are coming to see you manage.
No, but
we talked about investment.
Sure.
I got it in the third inning, and there's two parts of this story that are great. The first part is, and you can go on YouTube, it's a pretty good one. I got all four umpires. I started with the home plate umpire. This was the first year of the clock, and it turned into a clock. I thought the clock was being manipulated. I got the home plate umpire, then I got the third base umpire pretty good, and then the second base umpire bumped me. I screamed at the first base umpire for no reason whatsoever. So then, I got ejected. It's the third inning. My wife texted me and was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then the funny thing is my middle daughter was at the concession stand and getting food, and she had like a whole thing of food, and the TVs are over the concession stands.
Sure, yeah, the monitors are there.
And she said to the lady as she was checking out, she was like, "Oh my God." And the lady was like, "Honey, do you not have enough money for the food?" And she's like, "No, that's my dad." So that my wife was not happy with me. My daughter got embarrassed getting hot dogs and sodas, and but it was a good one. I got my money's worth on it.
That's really good.
I literally got my money's worth on it.
By the way, are you, maybe we can deal with this later, hopefully, because there's a lot more ground to cover we're not going to be able to cover today, but I think the pitch clock has been a rousing success, notwithstanding whether it was being manipulated in the case you were talking about. I think it's done exactly what the game needed. Are you in favor? Are you bored with it? Or what do you think?
I love it. I think once we got the glitches, I think there's still some ways that it can be manipulated a little bit, but the actual overall fan experience of it, I think is great. It's made the game go back to the game we loved when you and I were growing up. That it's Mike Hargrove used to slow it down, being a human rain delay.
Yes.
But like it wasn't. We don't need to see a guy step out of the box for 30 seconds between pitches. It's done nothing with arm injuries, which they thought it was going to do something with arm injuries. I think it has made the game much more watchable and much more fan friendly. Personally,
I agree totally. Speaking of the current state of the game, we should at least briefly touch on the World Series just concluded. I think I saw the stats today. Most watched World Series game or baseball game, I think in like 30 or 40 years was Game 7. I'm curious to get your view of it. I thought we talked about it a lot, especially games 6 and 7, that when it reaches, we try to cover all the sports. Basketball has tended to be my sport, but I will admit, when baseball theater gets that good, like that series eventually did, I don't think any other sport can compare to it. What did you make of it? What did you think?
I agree. It was the best World Series of my lifetime. I think the fact that we got 7 games, we got the 2 best teams, which, sometimes that doesn't happen. Right. Sometimes you get the fact that someone gets hot and they go into it. But this may be a weird take, but the thing I loved about it, and I love this from the teaching aspect of the game and moving forward, is there were so many little plays that ended up determining if the game was won or lost. And in my mind, as I'm watching this, I'm thinking next year in spring training, talking about the 4 depth, talking about base running of getting doubled off on a line drive when that run matters, how you take your lead at third base and where it's at, little things that ended up being the determining factor of if you were a World Series champion. It's so easy to go into Fort Myers this year and talk about little things and then highlight, like, listen, guys, this was the determining factor of a World Series. So, like, these are the things that should that should be important to us. I mean, it's what the Tom Kelly teams did so well here. But like when you have it at the end of end of this season, like you said, last game, everybody's watching, every player's watching, and then you're talking about, or even the tag that Miggy Rojas made. Those little things come into play, and I think again, this goes back to the reflection of things I should have done better previously. Like, did we focus enough on those things? And it was a great World Series to watch.
Well, you mentioned Rojas. To me, that the other thing that separates baseball from the other sports in the postseason is the number of times a non-superstar ends up making the biggest defensive play, hits the home, whatever the case may be. That's, to me, part of the charm of it. How many times is that? We see that happen over and over again. And it happens occasionally in football and basketball and hockey, but nowhere near as often.
No, it doesn't. I mean, we both grew up in Chicago. I grew up in Chicago at the height of Jordan. You knew Jordan was getting the ball like at all those times. And I legitimately, the Miggy Rojas thing, like when he hit the home run, I said to my wife, I'm like, if Rojas gets on here, like Ohtani's coming to the plate, they're going to be in trouble. In no way thinking Miggy Rojas is going yard there.
Right.
And that's going to tie the game. I'm thinking, like, they better not get to Shohei. And then Shohei, grounds out weakly. So I think those factors is what makes this game beautiful.
No question. One text I want to get to. This comes from Matt. No, that's not the one I'm looking for. They're coming in so fast that I got to scroll down. I should have favorited it earlier. With Shelton, see, I already got a good vibe with you. Talking about attention to detail. Can we expect more small ball this next season? As a huge baseball guy, I think it's a lost art. I miss the Twins piranha days, so to speak, under Gardenhire and how we play small ball, etc. I think we need to get more of that back in the game, especially with the Twins, and I'm hoping we will see it. I'll add to that. If you wanted to, does the game allow you to play it that way? What do you think?
Well, I think there's different definitions of small ball. If you're talking about bunting, I think a little bit of that comes to your personnel. So, and that's where I'm going, because I think a lot of people initially go to that factor.
Right.
I think we're seeing it come back in certain areas where it is important, whether it's the bunt for the hit or the sacrifice. A little bit of that has to go with what your personnel is. And for me to answer that fully, I don't know yet, because I don't know what our personnel is going to be like. But we are going to situationally be way more aware. And for me to talk about what happened last year, I can't do that, and I should not do that because I was not here. I'm just talking about my experience in the game. I do think the fact we're going to be aggressive on the bases. I think that's very important. I do think that there's some guys on this team that have the ability to affect the game in that way. So if that's small ball, I plan on doing that. I think the piranha portion that I took out of those years of those teams with Gardy, because I was in Cleveland during those years, is you felt like there was pressure all the time, and I love that. So if that's the factor that gentleman's talking about, we want other teams to feel pressure.
You mentioned starting pitching and how important that is to you, and I think we'll all agree it's still very vital. And I know you're not going to give us the answer to all the questions, but I'll try it this way. Do you feel like, even if you can't tell us, that that Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan will be a part of your rotation?
I'm planning on them being part of our rotation. That's what all my offseason planning on them being at the top. I've talked to both Pablo and Joe. I'm excited about Pablo and Joe being part of our rotation. I think that's going to be a strength of our team because of the depth. I know a lot of people wanted to highlight that we traded so many people at the deadline. We also brought back Abel and Taj Bradley. Taj Bradley's got really good stuff. Abel's got really good stuff. So, when you make those trades, that hurts. I understand that. Wasn't here. I'm looking at how we're going to reap the benefits of the fact of the guys we got back. But right now, I'm planning on those guys being in our rotation.
Welcome back to town.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for giving us time. We hope we can do it again.
We will definitely do it again. Thank you for having me.
Twins' new manager, Derek Shelton, kind enough to join us. How about an old Gopher coach? No, I don't mean he's old. I mean he used to be a Gopher football coach. Glenn Mason is next in studio here in the